Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening. It's still good afternoon. It's not dark yet, but it's an improvement in the time of year. Anyway, hello and welcome to this meeting of Bracknell Forest's executive. First item is to ask if there's any apologies, which I don't think.
No, none notified.
No, thank you. And are there any declarations of interest, please, Hannah? Nope, no declarations. Then, colleagues, if I can just give the usual caveat that should any of the items and discussion on any of the items take any unexpected turns and you suddenly find that there is a declaration of interest you would like to declare, please don't hesitate to interrupt proceedings so to do. Then we move to agenda item 3, which is to consider and approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of January. Are we happy that they are a correct record?
Yeah.
We are. No, thank you. That's all agreed. And are there any matters arising therefrom that don't appear on today's agenda? No. Thank you very much. Then, are we aware of any urgent items, Hannah?
No, none notified, but also just to confirm that Councillor Harrison has joined the meeting remotely.
Oh, thank you, and welcome to Councillor Harrison, albeit remotely. And we move on then to agenda item 5, which is the revenue budget for 2023-24. That begins on page 7. And I'd like to ask the Director of Finance, Councillor, Mr. Stuart McKellar, slip of the tongue, Mr. Stuart McKellar, to introduce that. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Leader, and I can reassure members I have no such aspirations. If I do a quick recap of where we are in the budget. So the executive did agree the draft budget proposals back on the 13th of December for consultation. At that point, we did not yet have the provisional local government finance settlement, which sets the level of resources available for the council. That was announced just before Christmas, and that resulted in a small increase in the level of resources available to us through grant. The final local government finance settlement was announced yesterday and added a further £27,000 of grant funding for Bracknell Forest for next year. So the recommendations that will be tabled by Councillor Hayden shortly will include reference to that additional £27,000, so that it is fully up to date, including the impact of the final settlement. So the key characteristics of this year's budget are really the same as is being faced up and down the country by residents and businesses, which is inflation has really dominated the impact on the council's budget this year. So our costs have increased by the best part of £10 million just through inflation, so just to stand still. In addition to that, there were, as always, a number of service pressures which have been balanced by a contribution of £7.5 million from savings, and Councillor Hayden will shortly make an announcement at the level of council tax increase and the use of reserves. However, it is noticeable that we have set aside funding in reserves to help our future budget position for a number of years, and this year we will definitely be drawing down from that because the scenario that we have been planning for has now arrived in 23-24. The report also includes some reference to the prudential indicators, prudential codes, and they will go on, as will the budget recommendations from this evening, to full council for consideration later this month. And there's also a small number of environments included in the report which require formal approval by the executive and council in due course. So I think that's all I need to say by way of introduction. Thank you, Leader, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. McKellar. Thank you. Are there any questions for the Director at this moment in time? Yes, Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we discover what the council's debt is at the moment, please?
Yes, Councillor Birch, that's referred to in the Treasury management documents within this paper, and the council's debt, long-term debt, remains at £80 million, the figure has been that since 2019.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations starting on page 7 of our papers, section 2, 2.1 through to 2.12. And I think...
Sorry, Councillor Hayden, you need to refer to the supplementary papers which have been circulated this evening rather than the main documents due to the changes from the final settlement.
Are they actually in mod.gov? Right. So in which case, I'd like to move the recommendations, section 2, 2.1 to 2.12. I suppose the major thing there, apart from the detail, is that we have a council tax precept of 4.
The leader has seconded it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That is seconded. Thank you.
So, Joy, I'll speak to him now. Somebody clarify this. Once again, we've we have to put forward a balanced budget. There's some pertinent points this time, is that we continue to provide major savings in terms of the services that we provide, but we haven't cut back really on any services at all. The other notable thing is that we, like everybody else in the country, have had to cope with unprecedented levels of inflation, which is way above what we ever expected, say, 12 months ago. But nonetheless, we are proposing an increase in council tax of 4.99%, which is the maximum allowed. Given that inflation is way above this figure, probably somewhere between 8 and 10%. And the key point there is that we still remain one of the lowest council taxes amongst the unitary authorities. I would like to thank the Director of Resources and his team in terms of preparing all the budgets and also for their prudent financial management, which puts us in this position, although we are actually, because of the exceptional circumstances, proposing we do transfer from reserves, which is one of the reasons that we've actually kept these reserves for. So, does anybody else want to make any comments on that?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Yes, Councillor Dr. Barnard.
Thank you. Colleagues, I know we'll have an opportunity to debate and discuss this more fully at full council, but I think it's important to note that in improving the commitment budget for this year for the Executive to be debated by full council, that certainly with regards to the area that I have responsibility for, children, young people and learning, this continues to support a number of the key things that we do. First, in order to maintain the outstanding services that we have for children and young people, as judged by Ofsted last year, and our continuing investment there, which includes in the budget making sure that we can attract the very best social workers and support staff that we need to deliver that. Secondly, as colleagues will know, Bracknell Forest Council has always and continues to provide a huge amount of support to our schools, backed by the school improvement and accountability policy that we implemented a number of years. This means that currently that over 98% of our schools are rated good or outstanding, and I think that commitment, which goes well beyond many other local authorities, is absolutely key in ensuring that our families, be they children or grandchildren, have the opportunity to go to good or outstanding schools. And that also goes for all those children that we have a special responsibility for. We recognised a year ago that we needed to make significant investment and support for SEND. That is going on apace at the moment, that the budget supports the necessary improvements that we need to continue to make there, but that's not to detract from that which we have done already. As colleagues will know, we've debated and discussed in full council the opening of the Bracken Walk Youth Hub in terms of the range of services, and unlike many councils, we continue to invest in support for our young people in that sort of placement. And I think overall what I would say is that the reason we can do this, and I think Councillor Hayden, you alluded to it, and no doubt we will discuss this in more detail elsewhere, is because of the very careful and sound financial management that we have. That means we're able to properly debate and discuss where we need to invest in services, where we need to be careful about the economies we make. And I think this really shows in the budget that's being put forward to this evening. We recognise it is tough for families, which is why we make good use of the Household Support Fund allocation that we have. And also, as you will notice from the recommendations, we're going to continue to provide some council tax support as well in all of this for those families. We know it's difficult, we know it's tough, but in the midst of that, many people rely on the services that this council brings, and I am pleased and confident with the budget that's being put forward that we can continue to do that in the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dr Barnard. Would anybody else like to speak? The seconder, Councillor Birch.
Just a very brief comment, if I may, apart from supporting the thanks to all the officers for the work they put in, both in delivering the budgets, delivering the services to budget, etc., but also to the team that puts it together, etc. So I really keen to support that. The reason I asked the question about the council's debt was to get a clear and accurate statement in the public domain, because at this time there appears to be a lot of misinformation going out into the public domain that isn't accurate. And I'm keen that any resident that sees information about the excellent services that are being delivered within this really well-defined budget and actually have a place to go and validate any claims. And that's here, that's in these budget documents. And those should be the only source that residents need to clarify any fact about how their money, and we recognise it's their money, is being spent. And so, once again, my thanks to everybody. The depth of detail in the papers is excellent, and I do hope that residents will take the time just to validate the information they see about what this council is delivering for the budget it is setting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Brunel Walker.
Thank you, Chairman, and my apologies for not being there this evening. I've been delayed on other matters. I want to add, as this is my last budget that goes through the executive that I'll be part of, I wanted to add my thanks for this, for not just this event, and I will be supporting the budget, but I wanted to thank all of those that have been involved, for all of those that have given input over the years into the budget process. I think the most important point here for residents is the cost of living is impacting everybody, and it's impacting everybody in different ways. Residents need to be reassured that every decision that we have made, every penny that goes into the budget, every project that we commit to, everything that we deliver is for them, and it's their money. And that in 20 years of being a councillor, we have never once at any point lost sight of the fact that this is their money, and that we will spend it as wisely as we can to give the maximum value for money for every penny of money that our residents give to us over the years. And I think residents, when they look around, they might think that that 4.99% is high. They might think that the number is a high number of council tax. And I hate the fact that it's 4.99%. But we are prudent and sensible. We've put together a budget that works, that protects the services that our residents value so highly. And Councillor Barnard has mentioned already the SEN provision, which is something I'm obviously very keenly interested in. But I want that message to be that had it not been for that sound financial management and that really strong approach to making sure that every penny is spent wisely, I think residents would be facing a significantly worse number, or worse for them, a significant cut in services. But because of the way that we've managed the budget, we've been able to preserve that. So I commend this budget. I will be supporting it, and my thanks to all of the officers and everyone else that's put this excellent budget together.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brunel Walker. Are there any further comments? No. Then back to the mover, Councillor Hayden, for summing up.
Thank you, Chair. I think the most important thing is that we've delivered a budget. We've had to increase council tax, but it's well below the rate of inflation at 4.99%. The recommendations also confirm other areas. For example, one of our pledges is to support the vulnerable. We have actually managed to increase the support for vulnerable families. At the same time, as my colleagues alluded to, we've got great social services. We've never really cut back on those at all. We have great schools. I think the point that Councillor Barnard made. And we've put in additional investments despite the financial pressures and things like special educational needs and the youth hub. And it's all a product of the careful and sound financial management that we've actually had from the officers. So on behalf of the whole executive is a resounding thank you to Stuart and everybody else. There has been some inaccurate talk about our long-term debt, and Councillor Birchdale has ascertained our long-term debt has not increased for several years. It's relatively small at £80 million, and that is all covered by assets which are actually earning surpluses which are underwriting some of the services that we're actually providing. The other thing, although 4.99 is regretful, it's well below the level of inflation, which has been a pressure which has caused great difficulty right across the local government sector. And thank you, Councillor Brunel Walker. It's a sad farewell, but thank you also for reminding us that this money is actually public money. It belongs to our residents, not to anybody else. And that our finances are very, very sound. And so I recommend that we adopt the recommendations actually put in the papers.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. And that takes us to agenda item 6, which is the capital programme for 2023-24, which begins on page 109. And that's to be introduced to us again by Mr. Stuart McKellar. So, Stuart, thank you.
Thank you, Leader. As with the revenue budget proposals, the capital budget was agreed for consultation back in December. There were no responses of note to the capital budget proposals through the consultation period. However, there are 2 new schemes proposed to be added in the final settled papers, and that's in paragraph 5.17. So that's one new scheme for the Berkshire Records Office, and Bretton Forest is part of the joint arrangement covering all of the Berkshire local authorities who jointly have responsibility for the records service. So there is a requirement to enhance, to extend the current building, so we have to make a contribution towards that as part of our contribution to the joint arrangements. And secondly, there's a proposed new housing scheme to be funded by a combination of Section 106 developer contributions for affordable housing and a further sum of Investor Save 723,000, but that's not part of the £1 million Investor Save budget already included separately in the budget, just for clarity. The reason why it's classed as Investor Save is because the rental income will cover any borrowing costs which the council has to incur to bring the scheme forward. The importance of that is that the capital programme does have an impact on the revenue budget, and we have to borrow significantly for it. So therefore, as in previous years, then the capital proposals are relatively modest, with the aim of not adding significant extra pressure to the revenue budget. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any questions? No? In which case, over to Councillor Hayden once again.
Thank you. In which case, I'd like to move the recommendations in section 2. I think it's page 109. Thank you. Once again, the capital fund is the capital budget is relatively modest. There are no... a lot of capital is around risk. Our risk is carefully managed. We are getting external funding, and some of the items won't be finally confirmed until we receive the grants on that. The two other points is, one is that we're still investing to save, which is a positive move. And secondly is Mr. McKellar commented about some of the housing that's being built. Some of that is aimed at the more vulnerable people, and that's a point I'd like to make, that we're still trying to do our utmost to actually protect the more vulnerable people in the borough. So if anybody else would like to make any more comments.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Would the seconder like to speak? No. Then, and there's no summing up, so can I please ask all those who support to show? Thank you, and that is unanimous. We move on to agenda item 7, which is the polling district and place review, and that's to be introduced by Ms. Anne Moore.
Thank you, Chair. This report presents the cross-party boundary review working group's proposal for a revised polling district and polling places scheme following the Borough Ward boundary review by the Local Government Boundary Commission for England and the Council's recent community governance review. The report also requests the appointment of designated alternative polling places so that the returning officer could locate a polling station at short notice should the primary venue become unavailable, so they're only really to be used in emergency circumstances. Each polling place was visited by officers to ensure their suitability in respect of the introduction of provisions within the Elections Act, specifically those regarding to accessibility and voter ID. 2 stages of public consultation were held and 13 representations were received. The majority supported the use of the current polling places except for those located in schools. The working group considered all the representations very carefully as part of the review, and only 2 schools are included in these proposals. Sandhurst Secondary School is content for the sports hall to continue to be used as a polling station for Alsmore and College Town, as there is a separate entrance. Wooden Hill School is proposed as the designated alternative to the Great Hollands Community Centre and would therefore only be used in an emergency. The overall number of polling stations remains unchanged in the proposals, and most electors will continue to vote at the location they've previously attended. You will see in the annex to the report, Annex A, the proposals are all set out by parish area with supporting information regarding each proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And are there any questions? No? No? In which case, I'm just looking. Councillor Birch, would you be good enough to move this?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to move the recommendation at 2.1.
Seconded.
Thank you. That's seconded. Councillor Dr. Barnard.
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive presentation, and I had the pleasure of chairing the working group, and there was, as was mentioned, extensive consultation, and I'm pleased to say that we listened very carefully, particularly to the use of schools, and we were mindful of the needs of the residents of Great Hollands around Wooden Hill, and I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear that that polling station, primary polling station, will move, but Wooden Hill will remain if something happens to the primary one. So that being, if you like, the major change, as it were, we've done this as a result of the main boundary review, and I'm sure we'll all get a chance to test these new polling stations are in a few weeks' time. So I recommend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birch and Councillor Dr Barnard.
Just to say, fully endorse everything that Councillor Birch has said, and to thank Anne, Phil and all the team for the huge amount of work they've done on this, because it's not something, as you say, Councillor Birch, they've done in isolation. They seem to have spent the last 3 to 4 years, I think, working through various manifestations of electoral boundary reviews and things like that. I think, you know, it's a good precedent for, I think, what will be a very well organised set of elections later this year. It always is a huge amount of thought's been put into it. I too am very pleased that we are, in line with many other authorities, moving away from using schools as primary polling stations. But again, you know, just really our thanks to Sandhurst School and others, you know, that have come forward in the roles that they have going forward. But I think it's a very good set of recommendations, and no doubt we'll be able to review it in the fullness of time during the course of this year. But no, very happy to support, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to also thank the Democratic Services officers and Moore and the team for all the work on this, and also because he's not going to thank himself, Councillor Dale Birch, for the work from the member side that's been put in on this. And it's important for democracy, I think, that people have a convenient place in their neighbourhood that they can go to vote, and it's quite important that we review that from time to time as boundaries change. People at parts of wards that are pretty much the same thing but called something different, and new estates come into being, and so on and so forth. It's also quite a good thing, I think, that we've got now a fallback position in case any of those polling stations that we have as our primary polling stations become unavailable for any reason. It's good to do some contingency planning. I think it shows thinking ahead, and this government, this council is very good at thinking ahead and planning for the longer term.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harrison. Thank you. Would anybody else care to comment? No? In which case, back to you, Councillor Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. In endorsing the thanks to Anne Moore and Phil Sadler, I'd also like to thank them for some of the excellent demonstrations in how to use interactive mapping.
Yes.
Because drawing lines around individual houses or individual streets became quite an interesting endeavour. It was a very good learning experience, and it assists elected members in understanding the core identities of the areas we're talking about, because this is what part of this project was about, because having somewhere to vote is an absolute, a decent and right place to vote is an absolute right of everyone to exercise their democratic rights, and I commend this to everyone.
Thank you very much, Councillor Birch. Would all those in favour please show? Thank you. That is unanimous. And with that, we move to item 8, which is the exclusion of public and press. Thank you. If we can take that as read, and or if anybody is not in favour, please show. No. Then we will ask Hannah to